You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder and CEO of We Deepen, Feminine Weapon, and also a certified professional coach and matchmaker. If you haven't lately, go check out the calendar at wedeepen.com. See all the upcoming social and transformational experiences. We are weaving these experiences together in hopes to help elevate the relational juju. I don't know why that's coming through, but this like relational energy worldwide. It's an alternative to a dating app. It's a place to go and deepen connection with a current lover, or also a place to journey and discover more about yourself so you can share that self more authentically with another human being. If you do enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, follow, rate it. It helps me to continue to record it and helps more people to discover it. I'm excited. I'm going to just jump into today's podcast because I am in Venice, California. You may have noticed there is like a week skipped. For the first time since I relaunched this podcast, Deepen with Christina, I have a week without releasing a podcast. And that was, I was feeling this immense overwhelm. And it was interesting of feeling this immense overwhelm because I was feeling it about a week and a half ago, and then a couple of days passed and I got really confused about it because I was like, did I just forget everything that was on my to-do list? Did it just fall off? Because all of a sudden I couldn't figure out and remember why I was so overwhelmed in that moment. And it just like there's this like essence all around of like this anxiety, of this constant feeling of stress. And I think a little bit of it, is that the being human is a process of suffering. Like you're just going to suffer. And when we die, that is when I believe the suffering stops. And it doesn't mean that we want to rush to the finish line of life, but more of being more content in the process of being alive and living and coping and picking up, the skills, or surrounding yourself with the people that just accept you to be who you are and can reduce and alleviate. I know for me is when I'm by myself, I can feel the stress and the challenges, but when I'm connected with somebody else, it's like all of it just washes away. And today, it's so exciting. I'm sitting here with the party coach. Again, Venice, California, with the party coach. A friend of mine recently connected me with Evan Cudworth, and he shared that he's a party coach. And I was like, what? A party coach? That is so cool. And yes, sign me up, because it's a lot of what essentially We Deepen is aiming to do is allowing people to be more connected and feel more of themselves while they're in relation with other human beings. So Evan and I jumped on the phone about 2 weeks ago, and I left that phone conversation being like, I cannot wait to have this guy on my podcast. It was such just a real conversation with you, and it was off the cusp of you getting a full page feature in LA Times. So dope. And I remember at the time I was like, oh my God, in Shop and Shag, I just got an LA Magazine article. And then you had all these opportunities were coming out of the woodwork of being featured as the party coach. Evan, welcome. It's so great to be able to share you with the listeners of this podcast.
Christina, thank you. Welcome to my little humble abode here in the Venice Canals. Keep Venice weird. I always like to start with that. Welcome everyone. I heard you just opening up about that anxiety can disappear when we connect with somebody else and do that type of work. Mm-hmm. But I also want to back up to I'm feeling that just starting the conversation. But this life is suffering, right? And that when we die, we end. I don't want to necessarily contradict that, but I've been like reworking my mission statement and what I do, and I believe that our natural state as humans is this state of wonder, right? And wonder is both, it's fear, right? It's like, I'm not really sure, they're scared, but wonder is like joy and excitement, right? And both of those things there. And I believe that anxiety and suffering comes when we try to outthink that wonder, that we're like, oh, I know enough about the world to know that like things are, and that's what anxiety to me feels like, right? And why I stepped into this party coach idea is, you know, when we go into social situations and we're thinking about, okay, I'm confident, I'm projecting this confidence, right? We're trying to control that sense of wonder instead of walking into a room, and if we see someone we're interested in, go and ask them a question about themselves, right? Start from curiosity, start from wonder. And if we can come back to that humility of like, we're meant to be in wonder mode, we're not meant to be an expert in every single situation that we stand into, that is actually what opens up like the opportunity to just like enjoy a lot more life.
I totally appreciate that reframe, and when you started speaking, I was like, "Ooh, we're going to get in some thoughtful discourse." However, it is the sense of wonderment is the other side of the suffering, because the suffering is like essentially in these expectations or these ideas that we have for our life, part of the reason I at this moment brought up the suffering I shared with you as I walked in the door. I had a friend who recently passed away, and there was this overwhelming feeling of sadness the past couple of days, and also this Jennifer was her name, and she was the founder of Yogi Tree in Los Angeles on the East Side. She was a mother of two. She birthed 2 children. She adopted 4. She was like this just amazing being. And so I'm navigating that. And then a friend also at the same time who I'm staying with right now is had her blood work run, and they had come back and said that she's in she's pre-menopause and for a young age. So she's feeling that of this being premenopause, and that, you know, this sadness comes over of like, I always wanted to be a mother and blah, 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 and all these things. And when you flip it, because what we learn in Clown Church, there's a Jet Everlith who was one of the episodes, I think she's episode 61 of Deep In with Christina, and she's been studying clown for years. And what I learned from her is tragedy plus time equals comedy. Mm-hmm. And so I hear when you step into the space of wonder, then it's like, well, what am I even suffering for? Like, what is the purpose? Again, I just keep thinking of and Jennifer's passing, and is that I woke up this morning and I'm here, and she's not here in the same way that she was here before, but she's here in some essence, and why are we suffering in her loss? It's almost like sense of wonder of like, where did you go? Mm-hmm. What's happening?
Yeah. Well, and grief and what we do with it is very much a part of my story. By the way, welcome everyone listening. So yes, I'm a party coach. You can also find me playing cello or hosting events. I do coaching. I've worked in the music industry. I raved for 15 years. And, you know, in the pandemic, was working in the music industry, and that job disappeared. And I was mourning the loss of like my career that was finally taking off in the way I wanted to. But I got this like signal basically from the world that was like, hey, all of the pain and suffering you went through in your 20s, because my mom had been sick for 8 years with cancer. I had friends to suicide. I was a high-functioning addict, you know, very much like every single weekend drinking to blackout for 10 to 15 years. and was constantly writing these long Facebook posts about depression and how I was curing it by like finding joy in the world. And really, I was a curious kid, and curious about what I was doing, but was convinced that if I just learned enough, if I could be smart enough, I could fix grief. Or I could understand what happened to my mom. And I could understand why my friends wanted to kill themselves. I could understand why cocaine was better than actually going out on dates, right? Like, if I could think my way into those things, then I would solve those problems. And it's only been through, going through that suffering that you realize there's like, things like meditation and yoga and waking up every day with a humility and a little bit more of a spirituality in the way that I get to approach relationships and my own interaction with my social life and otherwise, that I've been able to find a sense of like general peace. And I think I was afraid of that because I didn't want to be boring. And I noticed earlier, you talk in this, what this podcast is about like unlocking potential or unleashing potential. And that's another, I think, part of my mission. But I thought my biggest fear was like not showing up for my full potential. But actually what it was about was not being boring. And I kind of didn't care if I wasn't reaching my potential as long as I was doing something crazy. And I could had a good story. And I could it's good for the plot, sometimes we say. And it can be a really fun way to live, but I know there's a lot of people out there that are probably in these cycles of creating chaos and creating drama and creating exciting things in your life so that you don't have to sit with those thoughts and think about what boring feels like.
Was it that you didn't want to be perceived as being boring, or you didn't want to be bored?
Great question. I think it's probably both, because a little in my G5 laptop that I had in college, I was a Spanish minor, and above it I had a little Spanish phrase, was la ociosidad es la madre de todos los vicios. Basically, laziness is the mother of vice, right? And talk kind of about like this boredom of like, if you're static or still, you're not worth anything, right? And have since come to, I have an ADHD diagnosis. I have a lot of things around that of like movement was value and sort of having to constantly be stimulated. But I think I found other people that bored me, like I pitied them. I was like, what a boring person, And like, what a gross way to go through life, right? But, I think that was a very real emotion of like, I was like, I don't want to be like that person who just like wakes up every day and does the same thing and like has no ambition and like doesn't want to do whatever. And that's such a I don't know all the choices that the person has made to lead to that point in their life, or if they're in a transition and they're moving between grief and all they're doing right now between 9 to 5 is to hold on so that they're not falling apart. Like, so many people make these choices because they're in between or moving through the different things. But maybe, those are sometimes only the things you can learn with experience or with age. You can't learn that in a book.
I can see, though, you saying, like, I want to live.
Yes.
I want to make something of this life.
Yes.
And where do I begin to do that?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's your relationship to, like, ambition or potential? Or you, like, all, like, super high succeed from the get-go? What has that been like for you?
Well, I am an Aries.
Yeah.
Aries, we like to be first.
Yeah.
I'm very, I think, like, competitive in a way that, like, I want to continue to evolve and become a more better version of myself, and whatever that looks like. I think a lot of that, though, comes back to what is the definition of love. So to me, the definition of love is that it is a process of removing the ego, the layers and layers of the egos that are holding us back from being the most purest, authentic version of ourselves. And that is those things of, like, I used to have a deep fear of public speaking. And one of my teachers at the time, this is like a decade ago, was like, "Oh, your ego is so big." And I was like, "What are you talking about? My ego is so big. I have a fear of public speaking." And he's like, "Yeah, you're so self-centered. That you're so worried about yourself and being perfect that you're going to withhold information from other people because of, this idea of what perfection looks like to you." And I was like, whoa, that's an interesting reframe. You're right. So I was contorting myself in some ways. I used to throw all these events in New York City, and I would never speak at any of my events. I would get other people to speak on my behalf. And so that was something that I knew that I wanted to peel that back and see what else was underneath it there. So it was those, it's like meeting your fears, meeting the edges of your fears, and then moving through those. So that was one thing, and then ever increasing acts of sharing. You give to who you love, and that same teacher who said that to me was also around the time a decade ago that I was like, I don't care. This is David Guillaume at the Kabbalah Center. I was like, I don't care about being rich, and he was like, well, Christina, that the more that you have, the more that you can give. I was like, oh my God, that's such a great point too. Yes. Okay, so now the more resources that I can accumulate, even I look at it more of, you could look at it as monetary wealth, but I look at it from of the relationships that I have and the people that I know when friends do have challenges in one area of their health or another area of their life, that I have this Rolodex of people that I've nourished these relationships with, and that's to me is community, having the people around you that will be there for you. So those essential, if I think the meaning of life is the meaning as the meaning of love. So they coexist together.
I love that, and stripping away the ego to find love. I relate to. You're bringing up, I don't know if we talked about this in a previous conversation, but something I'm working through a lot right now is relationship to money and abundance and things like that. I obviously want to help people, and that's why I do what I do here. But I was going back and I looked at my high school yearbook when I went back. And again, one question I asked about ambition. I was voted most likely to be successful and most likely to be, and most dramatic. I was dramatic and successful.
Oh, interesting.
But my high school quote that I chose was a Simpsons quote from Montgomery Burns that was, I want to get it right, it was family, religion, friendship. These are the three demons you must slay if you want to succeed in business. And it was kind of a poke and a joke of capitalism destroys these things, right? Rich people obviously couldn't care about family and their friendship because they only care about money. And I wouldn't even have thought of myself as communist or anything, but I didn't want success for me to be monetary. I wanted to be loved, right? I wanted love and friendship and all those things around me. And, I think that is, at times, it's served me very well. And in other times, it's been very toxic and isolating because money has held me back from fully showing up for people that I want to in certain ways in life, And and when it comes to me that I'm wanting to push it away, recently before, taking this party coach job, I was making the most per hour and doing the most I had ever done. I was doing college admissions consulting, and I'd worked in this field for 6 or 7 years and had gotten pretty good at it. And I was doing work, but basically I was helping wealthy families get into Princeton, right? And the kids were pretty great. The families were fine as well. And there was a lot of part of the job that I liked. But something about, I was being billed at $600-700 an hour. And something about that, it felt gross in my body that I was part of this kind of a system. And I had a very visceral, I was like, I have to move that away. I was like, I don't want to be doing this. I need to be doing something else. And I'm all, like literally coming to these realizations as I'm talking to you right now about some of these things. But yeah, you know, like I don't have the full one-to-one on what that felt like, but when I was doing that type of work, I felt chained to something that I didn't feel like was allowing me to fully support and help people in a way that I wanted to. Does that make sense?
It makes sense,
Yeah.
but I'm curious of why. And the reason
Yeah.
I'll ask a little of the why is because of I think that there's a complexity or a nuance around this particular topic if you're going to address money and also in money in relationship with other people and connecting with other people. And there's sometimes that there's a sense of frugalness that is in. I grew up in my grandparents, they were so fucking frugal. Like anything outside of Kmart or fast food it was not, you know. And then, you know, I have friends who I also grew up with who were, you know, on the spectrum of wealth. Some were like, you know, wearing the Guess jeans and the expensive clothes when I was a kid, and others were not. You know, it was like the TJ Maxx and some of that stuff, I think, prevents a deeper connection because we create another level of value on top of it. But I also think of when you're sharing about sometimes there's like I guess a means to an end. And if you are a coach and you're charging, you know, of like, and value, I actually dislike the whole thing. It's like, well, name your value. What is your value?
Yeah.
Whatever. We all just make it up as it is anyway. But like, what actually? If I take it back to like the lessons of Kabbalah that my teacher, it's like, what provides you the greatest grounding for you to serve more love into the world?
Yeah. Well, and as you say that, like, it came to me very clearly why I wasn't doing it, why that didn't feel right to me, is that I had these other dreams of doing the work that I'm doing right now and speaking to a wider audience. And I'd been through this suffering and pain in the other areas of my life, and to do the hard work to create solutions for other people so that they can find stuff along this path. I was never going to do that work if I was staying in that world, in that college admissions world, because it felt very safe, and I was buying fancy things. I was going on trips. I went down to Costa Rica. I was like, literally I was, again, still like partying and still very much stuck in that. I would just buy nicer and nicer things and was not doing the internal work. And
so it was a cop-out.
Yes. Yeah.
It was a moment of time, of a lesson learned. I mean, I spent a decade of my career and, you know, I sold pharmaceuticals for a period of time. I was carrying Ambien CR, and my biggest competitor was Ambien, produced by the same company, but Ambien was going generic, and they needed to convert patients over to Ambien CR as quickly as possible. And I was like, why can't we just tell them to pull the blinds down? Or like, maybe they can meditate, or instead of just giving them a sleep aid. So I get, you know, these careers that we rebel against, and we shift and we go out and create our own. And I saw the book downstairs that you had on the ledge that said The Courage to Be Myself.
Courage to be disliked.
The Courage to Be Disliked. That's what it was. Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, the courage to be disliked, because I imagine you go into, when I was reading your LA Times article, you know, you joked about being here in Venice, and, you know, there's life coaches all over the place here in Venice. So to be over and be like, I'm going to be a party coach. I mean, that takes balls.
It's been that the courage to be disliked is still something, again, still working on too. You know, I want to be liked by everyone. I think that's why I loved parties, is because it was a place where I could dress up in a costume. I could like be 15 different people in a night. I'm very, I can within a sentence or two figure out what somebody like, what's their energy, match their energy, and make them feel great, right? And like being able to move around a room and do that in a party it still is in some ways like one of my favorite things in the world. But then what am I thinking about when I get home? It's that one person who didn't connect with me, right? And that's, I think, what really drove me into addiction and alcoholism was I was thinking about that one connection that didn't happen. And that would, even if I was joyful and happy and all of those things, that ended up controlling my life. And where I'm at right now and where I work with a lot of clients and see their success is they're coming more from a lot of people are coming from the other end, are either socially anxious, or have isolated, or sort of just have this idea of this is who I am and are stepping back into the party world. And I love working with those people as well. But I have seen even friends of mine and a lot of people sort of in this rave and party scene that have started to realize that it was a place of validation, right? Of a lot of different types of validation, but we were still always holding out for everyone needs to like me all the time.
So you and I are similar in some sense because back in 2017 to 2018, I was working as a dating coach, and while I was building We Deepen, so We Deepen was an accelerator program, and then on the side, my side hustle was being a dating coach, and I realized like, wow, most first dates are happening at bars and over drinks and cocktails, and I read a stat that had said, I think it was by Hinge or OkCupid, that if you drink alcohol, you're 90% more likely to get a match. That it was very like if you weren't, and also I had recently moved to Los Angeles, and Los Angeles, I mean, it is one of the, I would say, the rehab capitals
for sure.
Of the United States. And so there was so many people that I was meeting who were sober, and they integrate it with the quote unquote conscious scene, but it just felt insupportable. So I said to myself, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to feel what it is like to not drink for a year. And I gave up alcohol for 365 days. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made for myself. And I remember the Halloween. It was the Halloween that year. And my friend took me to a party here in Santa Monica. It was at the Victorian House. And she knew the promoter of the party. We arrived early, decked out in our Halloween outfits and heels. And I walked around the party and I was like, what am I going to do here? Like, how am I going to survive this party for this time? So I saw there was this piece of furniture that like a big desk dresser and a large mirror over top of it, and I jumped up on the piece of furniture and I sat there, and her and I were sitting there on it, and then there was a doorman close by, and he walked over to us to make sure we were okay, and I was like, oh, he thinks we're working this party because we're now mounted up in our cute outfits on this piece of furniture. And so I said to my girlfriend Keisha, and I was like, hey, do you have lipstick? She's like, yeah. So she hands her a lipstick, and I take the lipstick and I write on the mirror, truth or dare. And I start going out into the crowd and bringing people over to my truth or dare booth. And I just started improvising this truth or dare booth. And I had so much fun that night. I would bring people over to my quote unquote truth or dare booth, and I would ask them, what's your intention of the party? Like, what do you want? And they would tell me their intention. I'm like, oh, are you in a relationship? Are you single? And so they would give me this information, and then I would take all that information. I pretty much dare them what they wanted to do. And then oftentimes, whatever involved, they're usually involved connecting with some other person. And then I would have them bring that person back to me. So then they would just keep bringing more people back to my Truth or Dare booth, and I would send them out. And now still to this day, just this New Year's, I was at a party, and I was like, with a friend that I was there, I was like, let's play Truth or Dare. And I started even inviting other people into my Truth or Dare game.
Christy, we're so similar. I love that story. That, like, asking people intentions for the party, like, that's really the basis of what this party coach was about. Was I found that with my friends, when we would, everything from, like, we'd do 3-day festivals, we'd do the house in Joshua Tree, we'd get the Airbnbs, and it was like, stuff does start to feel a little similar after some time. But if we would literally set a simple intention of being like, what do we want to get out of this weekend, and speak that out, boom, you actually have a memory, right? You're like anchoring, and this is a lot of what I do with clients when people ask me, like, what's your advice as a party coach? This is my simple advice for anyone listening to this. If you want to have a great weekend out, a very simple 3-part intention, right? How do you want to feel at the party? Like, what's that high that you're chasing that is, something that's, like, tangible? Maybe it's a connection, maybe it's like letting loose, but whatever that is, find that. How are you going to feel when you leave? So sometimes people want to still have the energy for the next day, but some people want to leave it all on the floor, right? Be clear about that before you even step into it. And that way, the decisions usually you're making through the night are going to bring you closer to that type of thing. And then finally, next week, when you look back on this night, what are you proud of? Right? And already that's setting yourself up. Some people are like, oh, I don't want like put high expectations myself. These are not expectations. These are intentions, right? It can always shift. It can always change. It can always be those types of things. But this is going to like cue your brain so that when you feel those things or when you see those opportunities, you're more likely to take them. And you're not going to be stuck in your mind or your head. Especially if you're not drinking or drinking less, this is going to help you take action on those things instead of being like, oh, I can't do it because I'm not tipsy.
What's the most fun that you've had at a party?
Oh gosh, I love this question. One of the classic ones that I talk about is when I was studying abroad in Spain. I was in Madrid, and they did this Noche en Blanco where the whole night, like all the museums all across Madrid stayed open all night. And I had just turned 21, and even though it meant less in Europe, it was still super fun. And we were there with there was like 4 different colleges, and we were all out partying, and then we're like hopping from museums to clubs and everything, and then we hear this rumor that Daft Punk is playing like out in some warehouse. So we like walk like 2 or 3 miles. And this is before cell phones really were anything. We just had these little like razor phones. And of course we get out there and there's just like thousands of people around this thing, and as soon as we get there, the power gets cut and it's like goes to darkness. But then on that walk back, and I don't think Daft Punk was ever there, by the way. As we're walking back, we all just start chanting and singing, and we're singing in Spanish and just like walking through the nights and just vibing everywhere. And like, I've been working on this grand party theory, which essentially says that there are 3 things that you need, or one of 3 things, and if you get all 3, great, to make a party great, right? One of them, the most classic, is like reconnection, like reconnecting with an old friend, like finding something super familiar and like going deep into it, right? The second is something new, right? So like you come there and there's a surprise, something you didn't expect happens, and you're like super surprised and stimulated. The last, and the one that we tend to think about, but we often not prioritize as much, which is release. Parties are a place of release, where are you able to like expel energy or like just shed something that you're not able to do in the real world. And I sort of draw a I'm just motioning to you right now. This is a podcast. But basically imagine a triangle, and like all of those things are on the end. And if you're right in the middle of that, and a lot of us as we step back out to socialize now, we're not prioritizing any of those things, right? We're going to just be at a place. And if you're not allowing yourself to fully release or to go super deep and connect or to experience something new, you're going to be anxious because you're not experiencing one of these things that are essentially built for these parties to happen. So that was an example of a night where I was super surprised and I was like really releasing a lot, right? So I was getting like 2 points of those triangles. And one of the reasons why retreats and, these sort of deep experiences that we have at festivals is because you're getting all of those things. You're like going deep with your friends, you're doing a deep release, and you're experiencing something new. And as you go through your weekends and you go to every event, if you're not expecting to experience one of those things, don't go to the party. You're probably not going for a good reason.
And when you say of reconnecting with somebody and going deep, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I'd be curious to know if you have, for your events, do you precede people with certain questions or things that they'll have when they come and they connect?
Sometimes there has been some events we have done that before in the past, but not all of them.
Yeah. So there's, we've noticed this. I have some other friends here in Venice. They run this thing called More of That. Which is this sort of deep, a little bit deeper social events that they do. And one of the things I love they do, Meredith, she was actually my first purpose coach, and she's the one who coached me to become a party coach. So
cool.
I did this 7-week program with her. Shout out Meredith, I love you.
And she's the founder of More of That?
Yes. Yeah, her and Eric are the co-founders of this thing, More of That. And they throw these high vibe events, but usually they start with some sort of preceded, hey, turn to the person next to you and you're going to ask them what is the, what is the saddest thing that happened to you in the last week, right? Or something, or what's the, but a deep question that gets people out of that small talk.
Oh, got it. So you're saying, you weren't saying I initially thought that you meant during registration asking them a particular question. You mean once they arrive.
Yes, but literally that too. For the event, they literally hosted this social event last night, and as we were registering for the event, they had a question, and I should look at the exact kind of thing. They literally, as we registered for the event, they asked 2 or 3 questions that got you preceded and ready to interact in a way that was deeper than what you normally would at an event. And you couldn't go unless you answered those questions in the registration. Cool. So I really like stuff like that. I think some people are probably pretty annoyed by it, but I'd say to stage, if you're annoyed by it, you're probably the person who needs it the most, because you're probably not getting very much out of the events that you're going to right now.
Do you ever find that that somebody is aiming to go too deep, or you're not aiming? You don't want to reveal that information about yourself?
Yes. So I'm definitely an oversharer, right? I'll tend to go somewhere, but I also have a very sort of short, I wouldn't even call it battery, but it's when I'm done with the conversation, I'm done. I can't stay in that. It's very uncomfortable for me to stay in that kind of a place. So to have language to say, hey, I would really like to go deeper or go with you here, but I need to opt out of this for my own energy or my own language. I think that's something that you as a person need to set. But I don't think that you should go into these situations afraid that you're going to go too deep for anyone else. I think you should be able to go and be deep and be yourself, and don't be thinking about you're going too deep, because there might be someone else that wants to go deep with you there, and that's what they're looking for today. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. It reminds me too of, I remember there's a story that I read about a political figure who was running for office years and years ago in the UK, and there's 2 political figures running for office, and this woman went to dinner with both of them. And the first night she went to dinner with one, and she left the dinner feeling like he was the most fascinating person in the world. Mm-hmm. And the second dinner that she went to with the other political figure also running for office, she left the dinner feeling as though she was the most fascinating person alive. Yeah. And in the end, it was that second person was the one who won the election. Mm-hmm. And it shows around of, people love, it's almost, we spend hundreds of, the therapy industry is booming, and partly because we're all seeking for people to hear us.
Yes.
And be present with us and listen. So if you do that, if you give that gift to somebody else and you get curious about them and giving them the space to process their own existence in that moment, you've just given a gift and walked into an atmosphere and served it.
Yes. Well, I'm reaching for my phone now because today I just posted on my Instagram story, your natural state is wonder. Curiosity is the root of confidence. Stop trying to kill your anxiety with anxiety with confidence or boost. We seek to connect and use the Dale Carnegie quote, talk to someone about themselves and they'll listen for hours. And
talk to somebody about themselves and they'll listen for hours.
Yes. Which is when I shifted that of if I was going out to a party, I no longer had to impress anybody, but I had to go find somebody else that I was really curious about and just ask them questions. Everything shifted. And it was so like to hear your story of the lipstick on the mirror and like create and like basically asking these stories and like hear and getting people out of that comfort zone and creating that for other people. It's powerful experience for you, but two, like you created all these really cool experiences for other people too.
So how you're in a space of sobriety. Is there any social hacks? Because if someone could look at like alcohol or recreational type of drugs as social hacks, although they were also limiting. One of my mentors, Laura Nana, who she's 74, she's been teaching intimacy work for 4 decades, and I was on the phone with her last night, and she actually talked to me about wine because I was on my way to. Nick Spano from Recreation Cafe hosts this event called Love is Blind, and it's a blindfolded dinner party experience. So I was on my way there, and Laura had asked me in the car, she's like, "Oh, you..." She brought up wine, and I was like, "Oh, it's interesting you brought up wine," because I was even thinking, like, am I going to have a glass of wine tonight? I don't really think I'm going to have a glass of wine. But I was having that conversation with myself in the car on the way there, and she's like, I don't know why, but humans think that, like, they have this false sense of reality of what wine is because they believe that it's going to support them in connecting with other people, but it's actually limiting. She's like, if you even think of like, usually wine is poured into a glass that can break or fall. And so it inhibits people from having spontaneous connections. You can't just like hug someone or move in like a spontaneous way. You're going to spill something. It's like this protective mechanism that we have believed to think that it's supporting us in the deeper connection, but it's actually a toxic that's just inhibiting a deeper level of connection.
Yeah. So there's so many great TikTokers and people that are talking about this very same thing right now. And one of them I'm thinking about is that like everything we think about alcohol is wrong. Basically, like, oh, it gives us confidence. It's like fall. It's like all these, and I'm not going to do justice of talking through, but I guess like when you did your year of that 365 days of not drinking, what did you think of them? Did you need hacks to get through that year, or was it fairly easy for you to just say no?
I think, I needed the willpower that I was, and some hacks were for sure of enrolling other people and to know how much that was important for me. I think sometimes I remember writing to it. I'm actually one of the first Unleashed, and I've worked with Unleashed for years now, but Yarixa's Unleash, a 4-hour guided dance journey that was happening here in Los Angeles pre-COVID. And I remember one time, I was driving to that and I was playing like an Abraham Hicks Rampage. Mm-hmm. So, I think, and I would say the truth or dare, it was a hack. Yeah. It was a social hack. I've worked with photographers before in the past who were amateur photographers, and they would volunteer to come photograph my events, and I knew that was their social hack because they want it to be out in service, and that was kind of with their camera that made them feel more comfortable. I think tarot cards are a hack.
Yes.
Actually, I've used tarot cards before as a hack of like, oh, do you want to pull a card? And that's like a way to connect. So those are kind of social hacks when I'm out and about in particular places. I think another social hack that I work with is the countdown method. It's like the takeoff method where it's like 3, 2, 1, speak.
Yep. The Mel Robbins 5-second rule.
Yes.
So this is great. This is a great transition. So what I'm working on is like a mindset ritual and a habit that's a version of this that enables us to connect deeper socially. And I call it feel like dancing. And it basically works like this. So remember, like when your favorite song comes on at a wedding, or like that feeling of like your favorite song is on and like you want to dance and you don't care what you look like and you don't care what anything else is happening around you, but you're just like ready to vibe. Can we package up that feeling and train your body and your mind that when you sort of like, boom, I feel like dancing, that puts you in a space of connection. And how do you do that type of work? So I'll have people, I literally just worked with a client who she was doing like a long distance dating and was like meeting this guy for the first time in Las Vegas, but she hadn't socialized very much at all post-COVID and was very nervous about stepping back into that world. So we spent about 2 weeks first doing some work of like, okay, what are we really, doing a little bit of therapy coaching work, but then finding songs that she could lock into. So we picked a lot of Whitney Houston and a lot of like, I want to dance with somebody and some ABBA and things like that. And literally like on the phone, we would dance and get her in her body and feeling those things. As we got closer and closer up to that thing, she literally would put on the music. And right before she went to go meet this person, she had that music. She felt like dancing. And I get this email the next week. She's like, Evan, I was like in my head. I was joyful. I was like, I felt, like I never thought I could feel this comfortable and like safe and like happy around this again, And so using those triggers in our mind of like those good emotions and good things, I believe that we can practice and start to use this feel like dancing method to shut off social anxiety, but also that this can be like a code word, right? This could be a thing of like, if you're out somewhere, like you're anxious and sober at a party and you can lean over and like, feel like dancing? And like, yes. And like, this is somebody you could like lock and it's like, I'm feeling the same anxiety too. And it's not denying or pushing away what you're feeling. It's simply acknowledging that when we get into movement and we connect like through that connection, even if it's connecting with our own bodies and our own feelings, that is going to free us to reach that potential to do the thing that we didn't want to do.
I didn't love of like the leaning over to somebody and saying, feel like dancing. It's, one thing is if you're feeling the social anxiety is be like, you ever have social anxiety?
Yes, it's great. Yes.
And the other person's like, yeah, I do. And then you just bonded over that and you transmute it because you put it out in the essence. So I remember when we spoke 2 weeks ago on the phone, I was so drawn to, like, I was, it was around this time where I get connected to so many people and, you should meet this person. And we jumped on the line. I think the party coach thing was like a hook. I was like, that's, I still haven't heard that. But then your vibe and your essence and your energy was so, it was so unique and it was so authentic and real. And I remember you had sharing and I said, can we talk about this on this podcast? I remember you said, I haven't dated in a decade. And you said you would be open to sharing about that. Fast forward 2 weeks later, has anything changed?
Did we share about this? So like in the past 3 weeks, I literally got a message from like the first man I ever dated. And he sent me a message and he was like, I'm listening to this musical remember when we used to put on like a full hour-long musicals and just like make out for a full hour? And I was like, yes, why are you texting me this like out of nowhere, you know? And he's like, I don't know. I was listening to the song and just thinking about you. And we just got to talking. And I don't want to do a direct one-to-one for this, but I met him when I think I was like 19, 20, and it was before I really like was diving into drinking, and really like, where did alcohol or drugs replace some of those intimacy things that I was able to experience at that level? And in some ways, I think it replaced that deepest level where I was still able to, I had amazing friendships and was out all the time and surrounded by people that I loved, had an active sex life, and was doing all of those types of things. But there was something about that like deepest level that almost became interesting for me. And that if I was pursued or if I was in that space, I don't think I was open to it. And I wish I had a better, I've done so much therapy. I've talked about this so many different ways, and I still don't know, I'm comfortable not knowing the answers yet. But what I will say is I have like 7.5 months of sobriety right now, and what's coming up for me now is a slow return of that like speck of vulnerability that I was insisting on hiding. And yeah, I think that's kind of all I like. I can go into a lot of more stories around like what was good and bad during the time, but I think, well, I'll say with this too. I was very content in pursuing things that were not possible. I would fall in love with straight men. We would become party friends. We'd even sometimes become very close friends. And the mix of alcohol and drugs and like all of those things kept me very close in these circles. And those almost served as relationships for me for a long time. And this is fairly common in certain in gay community and stuff as well, but yeah, I'm still figuring that out.
And
yeah.
What's fairly common?
Is the pursuit, like either pursuing of straight people or like inaccessible. I think everybody can relate to this, of like falling in love with only things that you know are never going to be possible for you, or deliberately self-sabotaging it from the beginning. So that I would never actually have to get to that place of being rejected because I'm constantly in a state of rejection.
Oh, that's fascinating. An interesting space to put it. When you brought that up to me, I was, I have been in my life of, you know, I've been pretty traditional in how I relate to others. And when I say traditional, it's like straight monogamous. However, I've been in a state where I have so much enjoyed just fully being myself with someone else and fully getting to know them for really who they are and where they're at in this moment. If those traditional things that I valued, you know, I guess maybe that's my own questioning, were things that kind of happened pre-life, in the sense of like, sure, at 19 years old, it's to find the traditional, like before life got interesting, I'll say. Yeah. Complex, or the stories of overlays, you went out and you saw how fascinating human beings are, and their interest is multidimensional. And I'm relating to somebody who doesn't fit those constructs, but I really enjoy the time that I spend with this person, but it's not, he is sexually sovereign. And so it's kind of these boxes that we put ourselves in, are confining, that we're contorting ourselves and then exhibiting that self to other human beings with the hope that they like us, but we're keeping bits and pieces of ourselves secret.
Yes.
So I think why I was really also interested in that story, because of obviously of what I'm just sharing, the layering on top of that is Love is Blind is a TV show, and season 1 of Love is Blind. So this TV show is it's 15 men, 15 women. They go and they date behind walls, so they don't see each other for a week or so. They have to propose, and if they propose the person, they get to move on in the show. And so then it's about 5 couples move on to this next level, and they go and take them out. They see each other for the first time after now becoming engaged to one another, and they go live in a vacation resort for a weekend, and then from there, they go travel to each other's hometowns and get to know their families and their lifestyles. And then the show ends as they're standing at the altar deciding if they say I do and will be with each other forever and ever. But there was this one couple in season 1 that, and it's the only black couple in the show. And what I do notice, I think the show is genius in that it's the next, it's a new paradigm from The Bachelor. It's a really fascinating dating show. However, they're drinking the entire time. So we're still in mass market consciousness. And so this couple, this black couple, the guy, because in order to really to experience love in a partnership with somebody else, it's to really be able to be your full, true, authentic self. And the guy of this couple, shared with the woman that he has been with men. And that scene, it was just like she did not know how to handle that. That was something foreign to her. And women have been told, oh my God, he's going to leave you for another man. And how do you trust this? And that's gross. And all the things. And so a fight ensues. They end up leaving the show. And I just left that moment being oh my God, did we just miss a whole teaching moment and an opportunity on national television? And here you have, the one black couple in the show, and we just lost that. How did we not catch that situation? So I hear when you shared that story with me, I'm on the other side of that are these people that are having these secrets that they're suppressing of these moments, because there is true love that's happening in the connection, that you are having that experience. And whether drugs or whatever is causing it, it is the pureness of being human. And I really also am appreciating this idea of of the concept around pansexual. It's not about man or woman. It's about I love you. We can choose to go into a sexual realm with that or not, but that love, that divine love, is still in existence.
Yes, I co-sign all of that. And I'm the Whitney Houston song, my love is your love, my love is your love. That has been my experience of obviously, 99% of our relationships are not sexual, right? They're not in that kind of a love. And I think we put this romantic love on this pedestal as a way to we have that as a lock and key, and I aspire that for everybody and keep searching for that. And yet along the way, I've lived the most vibrant, full, crazy life that I could ever hope for. And I love all the experiences that I've had, exploring all these different ways to love and laugh on dance floors and parties and travel and all those things at the same time. And coming back again to what we sort of opened up with is, if I'm doing my job as a party coach, you are returning to your natural state, which is ecstatic wonder that we have this short time on this earth. And there's going to be suffering along the way, and you're going to leave a party, and that one person that didn't talk to you you're going to feel pain about that. But can you get up the next day and be like, dope, like, what does today look like? And can you meet some wonder with that? And I think if there's a wrong way to live life, it is passive consumption. It's giving up and saying, I'm going to scroll TikTok, I'm going to watch Netflix, I'm going to consume everyone else's life as a substitute for my own. And I've been at stages in my life where that felt really good. And I watched all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones in a depression, but I don't want to live my life that way. And if I can inspire you in your party to get out and feel like dancing, and if you're scared, ask somebody else to dance with you, you're going to find a lot of people on this earth that are wanting to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. I could sit here and talk to you all day. And the last thing that I want to I'll just wrap up is because we talked about the money thing and didn't necessarily come back to it. And over the holiday season, I was with some girlfriends, and I had shared that on my Facebook page, I had written about how I had just paid off my debt, and that there was this, one particular challenge with the debt collector, but I was vocal about this story on my Facebook page, and one of my girlfriends who I grew up with and went to elementary school with and beyond, and she was like, Christina, I don't think that you should be sharing that stuff publicly. Like, who's going to invest in you if you're sharing your financial challenges with the world on Facebook? and I was like, so don't be myself. Like, that's just me. Like, what is happening here? So thank you for your willingness to go to all the deepest levels of who you are and to share that. Because I think if you're going to hire anybody to be your party coach, you want the fucking real, authentic being who's like, I'm going to hold your hand and we are going to do this together.
And if that's in all the testimonials and feedback that I get from every client, that's usually number one. They're like, Evan didn't make me feel like I had a problem. He made me feel like I was along this journey with him. And I've done coaching trainings, and I've done things like that, like boundaries and things like that. And I'm cautious and careful of those things, but know that I will always show up as my raw, unfiltered party self, and we'll go further together.
Thank you. And look for Evan at any of We Deepen's parties. I'm going to make sure I invite him and get him a ticket when I can to come to all the parties. And he can be your wingman at each of the events. Thank you, Evan. And where can people best find you?
Oh, Christina, thank you so much for, again, keeping Venice weird, coming here with me. The work that you're doing, it's so important, and it's a beacon for a lot of people to open up into this. You can find me if you search The Party Coach on TikTok or Instagram, and then it's just Evan_Cudworth is the same there too. Cool. And we have a community. This Feel Like Dancing is there. Basically daily motivation on like how to bring this daily wonder back into your life. We do daily meditations. We do sort of Zoom dance parties. There's all kinds of things that are part of this community.
Amazing. Share that with us so we can keep sharing that through We Deepen as well.
I love it.
Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Deepen with Christina. Again, if you do enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, follow, share it with a friend. It helps more people find it, helps me continue to do it. Go check out that calendar at wedeepen.com. And if you're currently single, definitely join us in the matchmaking database. I love to support you in your relational life, whether that's introducing you to some special people or coaching you along the journey, guiding you. Okay, bye for now. I love you.